Hello, Cryptonauts! Welcome back to another cryptocurrency chat. This is really exciting today because we have a really cool person on for you today, and I hope you're going to be really interested in listening to what he has to say. Just a neat concept of a person that this individual has for both halves of his political and professional life. But it'll be really interesting to see. So, thank you for joining. My name is Jake Jabarelli, and I'm co-hosting today with Blockchain John and Cryptonaut Mike. Today on the podcast, we have Bruce Fenton, a crypto advocate and candidate for the United States Senate in New Hampshire. This is super exciting. So, Bruce, I'd like to start us off here with your favorite the icebreaker, rather, of what is your favorite vacation destination?
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It's great to be here. I'm a simple guy. And, first of all, it's a funny question for me because I am really, really blessed with how the kind of travel I've gotten to do all over the world. And I have a very unusual kind of problem. And this is like the most first world problem anybody's ever had. So I used to work for some really, really, really wealthy folks. And I spent months and months and months on the road at really, really, really fancy hotels. But actually, believe it or not, this sounds crazy, but they're kind of too fancy. Like you can get to a point where it's a little much to have people kind of like always serving you. And honestly, if I had my choice, I would choose like a regular nice hotel. I mean, I don't mind a nice hotel, don't get me wrong, but there's a certain category that's kind of like over the top. And I used to go these because my clients were there. I used to basically live at these things. They're not meant for that. It's fun for a few weeks, but after a few months, it's not that fun. So I actually don't like real fancy places, and I'm so blessed now. I have the opportunity. I get invited to real fancy places, but believe it or not, I actually don't like the super fancy places. Same with restaurants. Same reason. I'm kind of like a Chili's guy. Like I don't really want to go to I don't want to go to a Michelin. Michelin stars are okay, but I really don't. It's not my thing. I'd probably rather go and get some tacos or burritos or a nice cheeseburger. So for my favorite vacation, I like something like, one of my favorite places is like Club Med down in Florida. It's like just a very basic Club Med, very family friendly. Everybody has a different budget. I remember the first time we went, it was like very expensive for us, but it's usually, it's kind of a budget place. And, going down there, having some burgers, going to Disney World, something simple like that. Of all the places I've been blessed and been able to travel all over the world, Asia, Middle East, Europe, everything, kind of simple is probably what I would choose. And I think that's probably what my next vacation will be, honestly. Whenever all this campaign stuff is done, after I win in November, maybe I'll squeeze in a little simple Disney vacation or something with the family.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. I have personally been blessed to have grown up in California, one of, in my opinion, prettiest places. I've been to the East Coast too, but and have family back there, so it's good. I'm glad that your simple vacation is a good one. I appreciate that. So let me just get a little bit of our stuff out of the way. Thanks everyone for listening. Of course, C3 Media. You can please check out our coin tree of all places you can donate, support the channel. We sincerely appreciate it. Also, check us out on Discord. Of course, you can see our Discord here. Please come sign up if you'd like to hear more information about things like these interviews. YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Odyssey. We always are promoting Odyssey because it's blockchain based, and you can always catch our content there completely ad free. Never see an ad, no YouTube stuff, no ads whatsoever, because Odyssey is blockchain based. So check us out there if you would like to catch up with us. We're also doing t-shirts. You can check them out on shop.jabarelli.com. That is a way to check out the C3 Media t-shirts, Stack Sats, and HODL. So, let's just get into the introduction here of our wonderful guest. Bruce is an investor, an entrepreneur, and an enthusiast for Bitcoin. I was corrected about that. Cryptocurrency in particular, but it seems to be a Bitcoin maximalist. He is a world traveler, as he has mentioned, having spent many years in Middle East and Asia serving his clients. Bruce served in the U.S. Navy for 2 years, then worked as the vice president for Morgan Stanley, providing wealth management for global investing, handling over $4 billion worth of assets. So he definitely knows his money, and that will be useful for his Senate race, and, well, once he's elected. He founded Atlantic Financial, becoming the first full-service investment firm to use the internet. Awesome. That's good to hear back in the 90s. Then in 2015, Bruce became the executive director for the Bitcoin Foundation, a nonprofit founded in Washington, D.C. area whose mission was to clean up the reputation of Bitcoin after such scandals as Mt. Gox and Silk Road. He's also a lifetime member of that foundation. He co-founded the Satoshi Foundation Private Blockchain Retreat and is the organizer of the Dubai Bitcoin Conference. So, recently, Bruce serves as the managing director for Chainstone Labs and, of course, is a candidate for the U.S. Senate in New Hampshire. So, Bruce, to get you started, because we always like to kind of go back in time to get a feel for where things started with you. I know I already gave a brief history. What were you doing before you heard about crypto? We know it was finance, but I mean, really, how'd you get into finance in the beginning?
Yeah, so I got into finance because my mom was in the business, starting when I was a little kid. So I kind of grew up on the floor of a brokerage firm, and I got my first job there at my first real job. I worked as a little kid, but by 14, I had kind of a real job, and then I got licensed at 19. And I've been registered, licensed ever since. So I've had a long career, gotten to do all kinds of neat things, from working with regular mom and pop retail investors, small investors, large investors, all the way up to some of the very largest investors in the world. And that's where the travel came in. I was kind of a big picture economic advisor, working for big funds and private equity groups and things like that. And I would travel all over the world and top levels of economics. And so that's kind of what I was doing when I got into Bitcoin. I sort of gave up some pretty lucrative, good career opportunities to jump into Bitcoin. Ironically, back then, it's funny, my clients were too large. They couldn't really invest. I should have just kept in touch with all them, and I probably would have built a NIDIG sized company by now. But it didn't really seem a fit at the time. It was just so early with Bitcoin. I figured it would be a long time before, and it was. It was 7-8 years before that market kind of matured to the point that those big $1 billion investors are interested in it. So yeah, that's my background. Basically, investment and caring a lot about freedom and human rights and civil liberties and these kind of things. That's been my main focus for a long time.
So I guess it kind of answered my second question because I was trying to figure out what led you to crypto, but maybe you could elaborate on that because, I mean, you have a finance background, but I mean, the number of times I've seen your videos and follow your Twitter, and a lot of the stuff you say it seems to me like Bitcoin's the answer to the problems we've been having with fiat. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very interesting because politics and crypto have merged now. There's a lot of overlap, and for a lot of different reasons. But one of the most important is money, and that motivates me in both ways. Prior to Bitcoin, I was kind of a gold bug, not a super gold bug, but I definitely believed. I liked Peter Schiff, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great speaker on this and has been, and he still is. He's very good on a lot. He's It's amazing how wrong he is on Bitcoin and crypto, but he's quite right about almost everything else. He was one of my favorite follows before, but you know these properties I agreed with, that you need sound money and that this never ending printing is unsustainable. Folks like Peter and I were talking about that back in 2008 and stuff. I ran into him in Saudi Arabia and we were chatting about it. We both shared the same philosophy back then, that this, reckless printing of new money is totally unsustainable. I think we ran into each other in like 2008, 2009, right when they were doing all this TARP nonsense.
Right.
And so when I came across Bitcoin and found out that it had a limited supply, that was a big selling point for me. And the overall idea that money is broken is something that is really important to me. It's a very important thing in the world. It's something that we don't think enough about. But in my opinion, the broken money is responsible for a lot of evil, actual evil. As I got older in life and had some success and kind of looked at the world and figured out, what's important, I got down to fundamental questions about good versus evil. What can I do to be a good man in the world? What can I do to make the world better? What is wrong with the world? And those big questions led me to, reinforce my belief even more that it really is about the money. The most evil things in the world are usually the result of fiat money: war, death, mass destruction, governments killing their own people,
Right.
For-profit prisons. These are great evils. And Bitcoin does represent a solution to that. We have a solution, And that's a big deal. It's a bigger deal than politics. It's much bigger than anything I could do in the United States Senate or any other office. It's about the people, and that's a big deal. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I've noticed that you had a. I'm not trying to bring up anything. You did write a lot of good material over the years from your time in the last 20 years. I think you had a website previously called the Fenton Report, and I've read a lot of that. I mean, the site's not up anymore, but I feel like some of that has your opinions were clearly stated, and I it's clear from all the media that you've presented that you have a very good focus and you're very clear about your. I mean, it's a practical thing to say for a senator candidate or a Senate candidate to make sure you stick to your brand. But it's obvious to me that you have done that with everything you've said in the last 2 decades. That Bitcoin, I mean, obviously Bitcoin hasn't been around that long, but it's pretty clear with what you've said in the past that even now you're still saying the same thing that you've said before, that this needs to change. When is it going to change? As soon as you get a chance to help change it. So I would ask, what factors, and I think it's obvious at this point, led you to decide to run for U.S. Senate?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, that's great that you mentioned Fenton Report. I appreciate the shout out because it's funny you mentioned that because just a week or two ago, I was sitting down with one of the uh, web guys and I said, I got to get that old content up. And they've been working on restoring a lot of that because I did exactly what you did. I remembered, now that I'm running for office, funny thing is I got kind of private and I'll get to why I'm running in a second. But before this, around 2016, 17, a lot of folks who know me or listening would know that I kind of got low profile. I stopped accepting public speaking engagements. I just stopped going to conferences. At one point, I even grayed out my Twitter and changed it to a name, so it was the only people who knew my name would have followed me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have my photo online, and I had a big beard and longer hair, and I was just kind of being private and hidden. And oh, sorry, what was my point on that? I was going to tell
privacy?
you something.
Something about privacy, maybe? Or
no, I don't.
Did you have something else going on with that? Okay, well.
Well, anyway, the reason that I'm running, so I came out of that kind of, I'll remember what the point I was going to say on that. So I came out of that sort of, private kind of world, and I decided to run for office because it's basically where our world is right now. And I think that and this is kind of what I was getting at, we're in this point of good versus evil. We're in this situation where I think that, fiat and a lot of the things broadly going on with government are actually evil. And that's really significant. So it's a very important time for us as humans and us as Americans to get this right. And I care a lot about our country. And we did a lot of good things, the way that we set up the original Constitution and Bill of Rights, our checks and balances system, our respect for public, private property rights, our respect for self-defense, these kind of things are good, and they've made America a great nation, and we need to embrace that. We need to, embrace those core concepts of the Constitution and liberty and freedom and everything, and like not. And we have to reject the tyranny and the control and the centralized planning and everything. So anyway, but what was your original thing, what reminded me what you said about Fenton Report. So during this time, I kind of took everything down. I kind of went low profile online,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was just a couple weeks ago I remembered. I said, yeah, you know what? I think I wrote a lot of good stuff for Fenton Report, and sure enough, I went back and I did what you did. I had stuff going back. I was kind of impressed myself, and some of my old videos are kind of funny too. There's videos from 13, 14, 15 years ago where I'm talking about TARP and bailouts and
Yep.
Same exact stuff I'm talking about now. Some of them are like the same talking points. If it works, I keep saying it. So, I kind of got a kick out of that when I saw those things. But so yeah, I mean that was the thing. I was kind of low key, leave me alone person, but they shook the, they shook the country too much and they pushed too far. So now, hopefully the more of the leave me alone people are going to get angry,
Yep.
and we're going to go and take our country back.
I agree with that. It's a very, very good point of making. In fact, I wasn't thinking of it so much, but I will admit that at one point I personally decided, what was it, 2018, I decided I wanted to run for local government. I didn't get very far at all. But I really appreciate that when you get hit with a passionate point, you're like, this can't go on. This can't. And you're so passionate. And we watched Mike and John and myself have all watched your most recent video where you're talking with all the other Republican candidates for the Senate, and your voice seems the most powerful. You're very much in the face of those other four men, and just kept being like, look, we have to do something about all these different issues, and if not the only way to do this is by changing the system, and we have to start immediately. I mean, maybe I'm paraphrasing what you're saying. You might agree with it, may not. But I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your conviction, and I think that will definitely help in your Senate candidacy. So my final question, at least of this so far, is how can, and I'm sure you have a lot to say on this, crypto itself, if not Bitcoin, change or improve the U.S. government and the lives of its citizens?
Well, the big thing is the root. It's the 9 million pound gorilla. The root of all of it is the money, and the money's broken. Politicians broke it. They give you this phony printed thing with people's dead presidents' pictures on it, and they tell you it's money, and then they print a bunch more and give it to their cronies. And that's not money. It's just a scam. It used to be money, and year after year for the last 50 years, they've made it less and less money, and it's not backed by anything. It's just a scam that's living on the fumes of what it used to be, which it was backed by gold, 50 years ago. And so that is a fundamental thing. Now, as far as how can government embrace that, there are a lot of people who say, well, that would be great. Let's get the government, buying Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin and paying its bills with Bitcoin, accepting taxes in Bitcoin and having Bitcoin registration and legislation and Bitcoin this and Bitcoin. No, I just want them out of our way. I'd want them to just fade away into irrelevance. I don't think the highest goal is to get a government to buy Bitcoin. The highest goal is to get the government to leave us all alone. Let us buy whatever the heck we want. That's what the role of government should be. And that's what I would do if I'm sent down there. I'll fight consistently to just get these people out of our lives. Just no, all the time on all these stupid bills. Every time they're trying to do government expansion of their power and increasing tyranny and, movement passes and ministries of truth. And every single time, all of it, no, 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 no. 1,000-page bills that you don't have time to read, no. Just consistently no. The only things I'd vote yes for are things that are deregulatory or, certain examples of, national defense and, real stuff. The real stuff is what they should be doing. But, most of what they've done is terrible, and most of the laws should be reversed. I'd like to scrap 90% of them. And here's the crazy thing. We are in such crazy times that someone like me is exactly sort of what you need down there, a disruptor. Somebody said earlier, they said, what would be your dream bill? And I said kind of jokingly, I'd cut, 15 different agencies in one paragraph in a bill. Just here's these agencies are abolished and defunded. And I kind of chuckled about it. Well, that would never happen. And then I said, well, wait a minute. I can't actually say that because we are in such unprecedented, crazy, epic times that anything can happen. I mean, we're basically bankrupt. I mean, would it really shock us if the United States is bankrupt in 2 years and we have to shut down 15 agencies? I mean, that's a bad reason to do it, but at least we'd have that outcome. We're going to, because eventually this is unsustainable. It's going to happen either this year, next year, 10 years. I mean, it's not going to go on for another 10 years like this. Something's going to pay the piper. And so it's significant time. So sort of anything could happen, and I could end up doing anything down there. And that's all the more reason why it's so important to send somebody like me down there in these crazy epic times.
Yeah, I think you and I have a similar background. And I mean, I was raised Republican, but I'm not anything at the moment. But we've also lived in a similar time. I think you and I are close in age. And so we kind of lived through the Reagan era. We lived through the Bush Senior and the Clinton era, and of course the last 20 years. Most people who are of voting age are aware of that to some degree, even if they were children in the last 20 years. But I feel like it does feel like a lot of things have changed. What they said with the interest rates haven't been this high from the Fed since we were kids, you and I, since the 70s. It's really quite insane. A lot of things that seem to be happening feels. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but it feels sometimes like it's the collapse of the Roman Empire, and if we don't fix it, it's just going to burn. And I don't want that to happen. I don't think any of us wants that to happen. Land of the free. We need to be free. So I'm not sure if my ideals are explicitly libertarian, but I definitely feel sometimes that I
Well,
identify with the ideals to some degree.
your comment on the Roman Empire is an important one because, and I say this often, we are in times of epic change.
Yes.
These are not normal times right now. These are times of epic change. It's a very weird time right now. So
Hmm.
it is the collapse of something. It's the collapse of our old way of life. And we have these cycles every century or so where everything changes. Money changes, systems change, borders change, everything changes. And that's what we're in right now. So that's happening, and we don't know how big the change is. Some sort of fourth turning times like this are more epic than others, but they're always epic. 100 years ago, I mean, we're going to see borders change. We're going to see, even language change, and certainly money change radically. Religion is changing a little bit, maybe change a lot. I mean, we know it's going to be a big deal because we're in it. And there's a great book called The Fourth Turning, which kind of studied this, and it was written, 30 years ago, and it sort of predicted it happening right around now. It said, "Hey, every 100 years or so, this happens. Get ready, mid 2020." And sure enough, here it is. So it's especially good book now, but. And there's other historians that have looked into this concept. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that over time, there's many points in history, like 100 years ago, where boom, everything changed. People who grew up with a horse, never seen an engine, find themselves on the battlefields of France with getting mustard gas and planes and tanks flying around. So the world changes radically and significantly, and we're in that right now. Look at what's
Yes.
changed in the last 2 years. I mean, but we're just in the beginning of it. This is going to be nth order effects on top of nth order effects. You got supply chain and economics and a meltdown of work and systems and employment, and all kinds of fundamental things are breaking, and clearly the money is already broken, and there's also geopolitical turmoil. So there's a lot going on right now. So we don't know how significant, but it is very significant, and it could be really significant. I mean, we could have religious revolution and all kinds of other crazy things that just completely change the world as we know it. Or we could have, 2 or 3 decades of darkness and turmoil where, we become an authoritarian state and everything breaks down. I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in your commentary, obviously from your actual Twitter and from other videos that you've made, whether it's been an interview or a debate like you had recently, a commentary about BlackRock. And I have a question from Mike. Do you want to read your question about BlackRock, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah. Hi, Bruce. Thanks for coming on. It's really cool to have you while you're running for Senate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. My question, you're kind of talking about what you bring to the table is the power of saying you got a no vote. Once you get elected and you're a senator, how will you deal with your coworkers that are heavily involved with BlackRock? The obstacles they're going to put up.
Yeah, they're not going to like me down there. Nobody's going to like me other than a handful of people. There are some real good folks down there. People like, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey and these kind of folks. But, in general, the swamp's not going to like me. They don't like me already. And the more of a threat I am, the more they dislike me. So, as far as how I deal with my colleagues, now here's the thing. I would try and be civil and courteous. And I do love building bridges. I'd love to find common ground. I'd love to find common ground with Senator Warren or AOC in Congress or anybody, people that I disagree with. There's got to be something we agree with.
Mm-hmm.
AOC is Congress, not Senate, but she had something that she'd mentioned, accredited investor rules being unfair, and I'm like, hey, that's great. I'd love to, or somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who's in the Senate, if she agreed with that and we could do a bill together, hey, that's progress. If there's anything deregulatory, I mean, a lot of them want to see reductions of government power in some ways. I'd like to bridge, with the left. But here's the thing: because we're in such interesting times, again, anything can happen. So I am afraid and worried that we are going to end up in such turmoil economically or geopolitically that the ideas will actually matter. It'll actually matter that, unfortunately, we could be facing something where, Elizabeth Warren is worried about her family's safety, worried about her own food because we're in such a dire straits, or, China invades Taiwan or something like that. And and then the magnitude of this becomes more apparent. And maybe even some of the folks who've been, kind of worried about, which PACs are going to support them and all of this stuff, recognize that at the end of the day, this is America. We got to get this stuff right. And if the magnitude of the situation is serious enough, then we really can do some bipartisan things. I really could reach out to the Elizabeth Warrens if it's dire enough. She may not listen to me on something like a Bitcoin bill, but if it's something that the entire future of the nation is at stake, and I do think that's the way it is. I think our nation is at stake. We have a lot of threats to it, and I think that even a lot of the Democrats that I strongly disagree with, they could be. I'd like to have them see why I believe what I believe. So that's how I'd like to deal with my colleagues down there.
I think along those exact lines that you just mentioned. Sorry, Mike, if you had something further to say.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you. Along the lines of what Elizabeth Warren and particularly Bernie Sanders are generally speaking about, it seems, is this regulation of crypto. And I'm sure you have a very strong opinion about that as well, because you've been doing this for a while and you have a background in finance. How would you address Gary Gensler's aggressive stance? I mean, it's been very vague, despite the fact that they keep pushing companies on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. How would you address that, if need be?
Yeah, I think overall we need less regulations, not more. I wouldn't be in favor of any new federal regulations on cryptocurrencies of any kind, including Bitcoin, including everything else. And securities is an interesting one because I've been securities registered for 30 years, so I understand the SEC quite well. I'm governed by them, and I'd like to see it, reformed. I've said dismantle before, which is probably a little strong and not that realistic, but certainly significant reforms. A lot of the general idea that we need a nanny state looking over us, telling people what they can invest in and what they can't, is absurd. Like, why? I mean, what is the argument? Well, they're going to keep it safe. No, they're not. They haven't kept it safe for 85 years. They haven't.
Exactly.
Things aren't any more safe here than they are anywhere else. It's not like, oh yeah, America, that's where you go and you can't lose money. No, I mean, investments, and they know that. I mean, the SEC knows that. I mean, all their disclosures. I mean, everything says you can lose money, and so, it would be preferable to just let the markets work. I'm not convinced that they do much good. As far as regulators go, they're one of the least bad, honestly. I mean, they're quite bad, and I wish that they didn't even exist. But there's a whole mess of other ones that are much worse and much more expensive. The SEC is tiny by government standards, but there's a lot of others that are, quite large and invasive and are interfering with more businesses and more people's lives. So I'd be in favor of cutting them all. With the SEC specifically, we should make it so that it's much easier for people to raise money and trade their stocks. And they've done a little bit of that with improvements in Reg CF and other rules, but we need to do a lot more.
So along those lines as well, I don't really have an explicit question of this, but you know how the FDIC is supposed to protect people in their investments, or well, in their savings at least. Do you feel? You've just stated it pretty clearly that you want less regulation. Of course, I agree with that, actually. One of the things that bothers me is I can't become accredited because I don't make enough money and I don't have enough stockpile of cash. But from the standpoint of a person who just wants to do something with the little that they have, maybe $10 or $100, you can't do accredited investing because they don't know, well, you're not big enough. Who cares about you? And I would say that you would probably agree that with less regulation means that people can do with as they wish with their money, because hey, it's their money. Who is the government to step in and say, sorry, you can't invest that $100?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm totally against those rules. It's not the government's business at all. I don't think we should have accredited investor rules, or we shouldn't have AML KYC rules or any of these other things. I mean, it's a transaction between two people. And in the beginning of my career, you could buy stocks just like you could buy a television at Walmart. You didn't need your ID. You didn't need your ID to buy stocks. You could just call up your broker and buy stocks, and you had to pay within a week. So you could just call up on the phone and say, hey, I'll take 100 shares of IBM, and they'll say, okay, $3,300. Pay it's Monday. Give me the money by Monday. You'd have a week to pay. And all they needed was your name and address. They didn't even need your date of birth. They didn't take your social, and they didn't take your driver's license. Right. And now we have an entire generation of young people who don't know that that's the way it was just a little while ago. I mean, I'm not that old.
Exactly.
This is in my career. So
right.
Now we have billions and billions of dollars and all this waste and all this hassle because of AML KYC, and it's like, why? That's none of your business. Exactly. Who are you guys? You guys are supposed to be serving us. It's not your business to be up in our business like, oh, yes, you're accredited, you're not accredited, you can offer this, you can't offer this, you got to file Form BD and Form C and Form CF and all that. No. Get out of our business. You're supposed to work for us. Give us our money back and go home.
Right,
That's what I
right.
feel about these clowns.
This kind of leads into the question. Blockchain John and I have our podcast twice weekly on Wednesday and Sunday, and we do talk about this particular next question. And I know it wasn't in the original list, but it relates to what we're talking about: regulation, SEC, et cetera, within how the government is running things. And I know you have strong feelings about it. You've already said. It has been talk, and I don't know where the SEC is on their development on this, but how do you feel about CBDCs?
Yeah, I mean it's something I talk about a lot. I think it's a very, very dangerous thing. So central bank digital currency (CBDCs) enable government to issue a cryptocurrency like thing. It's certainly not like Bitcoin because it's government and totally centralized, but they're able to issue these digital tokens that represent money, and it's central bank money, so it's real dollars or dirhams or reals or pounds or whatever. And the problem with that is that it gives politicians total and complete control over money. They can shut off the money. If somebody says something they don't like or does something they don't like, they can shut the money off. And that power, no matter how closely they say they're going to restrict it or anything else, that power is not a power we can allow government to have. We cannot, and Democrats and socialists and Antifa and Republicans and rednecks and right wingers have all got to stand shoulder to shoulder on this issue, or we are all lost. We cannot have a society or a system where politicians can shut off money. Period. Doesn't matter whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump, no, or Anthony Fauci or Rand Paul. No politician should have the power to shut off. And Rand Paul is the one who wouldn't want the power of that list, but no politician should have the power to shut off our money. And because in a digital world, that's game over. In a digital world, think about it. Think about if they just shut off your money, not shut off your bank accounts. Your actual dollars are no good anymore. Like they're dead on the blockchain. They burned your private keys, so to speak. Think about that. Think about that power. In a digital world, like your actual bank account, I mean, nothing would work. You wouldn't even be able to have Netflix. We wouldn't be able to have this telephone conversation. You don't have internet. You got nothing. They shut off your money in this world and say your money's bad. Susan's money's bad. Tony's money's bad. That's it. And you know how they'll do it. They'll do it that way. And the first thing they'll do is they'll say, well, it's only terrorists. Well,
Yeah.
and then what? You know who's going to be a terrorist? There was a list that said the John Birch Society is a terrorist. It's like a group of elderly conservatives. I mean, come on. We can never, ever, ever. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. And this is something I would try and find common ground. I mean, I don't care who you are, Elizabeth Warren or whatever. I would sit down. I'd say, come on, human to human. Let's talk this out here. Like you got to see. I know you got your deal and you got your motivation, you got your supporters, and you're doing your thing. And what do I know about that? But you can't allow this. Cannot. CBDCs are a step too far. Too much power in the hands of politicians.
Exactly. I would think we would agree with you on wholeheartedly that CBDCs, although I'm quite certain that the U.S. will probably still pursue it, and either find something they can use to manipulate. Just my opinion, but I guess the thing that comes to mind is a quote from a movie that I particularly like, V for Vendetta, that says governments or people should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Absolutely. I love that movie.
Yeah. So along those lines, I would like to ask another question that Mike had. I don't know if Mike wants to pose it himself, but it comes into kind of like financial crimes of politicians. Mike, do you want to state what you said in that question?
Yeah. So I was wondering, there's a different standard of punishment for politicians versus regular citizens when it comes to certain crimes like insider trading. Did you try to make the board more equal as senator?
Yeah, you asked a great question, and I've been asked that similar question many times. But the way you asked it was perfect, making it equal. I'd like to make it equal. I wouldn't like to have these laws for anybody. I mean, insider trading is another kind of weird law. It's like, who's the victim? Like, okay, yeah, the fat cats are getting an advantage over the other people. It's like, okay, and like, why do we need mother government involved in that? I mean, if you care about that as an investor, you should have a disclosure and you should say, "Hey, are you trading on material insider information?" And if the company says no, and they do it anyway, well, that's fraud, and then you have a fraud case against them. We don't really need mother government involved in that. So I would like to see the playing field even, but not by punishing. Because somebody just some hours ago they said, would you like to punish the Congress members more? And I I don't think that that's the solution. I think we need less laws, less regulations. I do sympathize because a lot of people are saying, they have the impression that, these people are a bunch of crooks. And in many ways, they are. But I'd be cautious about, because you could also use it as a weapon. You don't want to have financial weapons that could be used in a situation where you could start manipulating votes or something like that, and saying, hey, this person can't own their own business because it's insider trading or whatever. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So speaking to what we were talking about earlier about the power of politicians, can you expand more on the importance of the filibuster and what you're going to be doing on July 18th?
Yeah. So the filibuster is a unique power that the U.S. Senate, or, in the U.S. Senate, where if a senator has the floor and they keep talking, they can't take the floor away from them. So it can delay things, it can change things, and it's been used many times in history. Rand Paul did a very successful and well-known filibuster. Uh, Not sure how many years. It feels like 10 years ago, but I'm not sure. I think his was 14 hours. The record is a little over 24 hours, and basically it's just a long speech. There's been a lot of them that are in like the 9 hour range. A senator will just filibuster, and that just means they just keep on talking, and either don't yield the floor, or they may yield quickly for a question, but they have to be careful and make sure that the person asking the question is a friend, because if they wouldn't give it to somebody else, because then they could take the floor. So that's what a filibuster is, and it is an important power, and it's under threat right now in our country, because there's some people who don't like it, because it enables one person, one lone wolf, and it often is used when it's only one person who feels strongly enough about something, like Rand Paul did about drone bombings and stuff. He's like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to stand here for 15 hours if I have to, and I'm not going to vote for it. And that makes some waves. It delays legislation. It can do a lot of things. So it's an important power, and it should be there. So I'm going to give my own filibuster. I'm going to go and speak for several hours, and hopefully most of the day or more. And I'm just going to talk. I'm going to talk about freedom, and I'm going to, just honor that filibuster. And it's hard to fill time with content. But I'm a pretty good talker, so we'll just see. We're just going to go with it and see what happens. And I'm going to have it'll be at a hotel around the Manchester area, busy place in New Hampshire. People can stop by, and we'll try and have some food or something, and I'll take live questions. I'm trying to be very accessible in this campaign. A lot of candidates are very standoffish. A lot of things are scripted. They use, consultants and things like that. I think it's important to be out there. So I want to be available. People be able to, certainly with this filibuster, anybody who wants to see me and meet me should be able to stop by and ask a question or something like that. And, I give out my mobile number, these kind of things. I think that's important. So I like the idea of just doing a real long speech and answering anybody's questions. I've done like 3 hour clubhouses before. I think we could do just a long thing where anybody who wants to talk or debate, I don't mind debating either. Let's go for this. We've got a country to save. We got to figure out what's going on in this world, and we've got to get it right.
Definitely. It's interesting to see. Like I said, I've watched several of your videos, not just from your Twitter feed, but from your YouTube channel. But you definitely have like I said before, a clear message. You have good conviction, and it doesn't. I honestly, at this point, can't find something that would flap you. I've yet to see it. Your idealism isn't just ideal; it's definitive. It's working toward the goal of getting something done that will work. You probably proved it in your own life. I know you had one other question, Mike, but I think we have another question from John. John says, "Would you?" Or John, did you want to say it, or can you not right now? Probably not. Okay. It says, would you bring individuals from the private sector to fix much of the country's or world's challenges without special interest or political graft?
Yeah, well, if elected, I don't want to bring anybody anywhere. Senators don't bring too many people. You have a staff of 10 or 20 people, 10 or 15 people usually, um, and then they do have some role with appointments for ambassadors and things like that. They confirm them, but I don't really want to have more people involved in government. I want people who just want to dismantle the whole mess. I want people to go in there and just reduce it as much as they possibly can. That's what I would try and do, including with my own office. If I win as U.S. Senator, I want people to still call me Bruce, and I don't want to. I'm not going to spend my entire budget, and I'm not going to give a whole bunch of jobs to cronies. And
Sure.
I'm sure as heck never going to vote for giving a whole bunch of taxpayer money to cronies. That's the whole problem. We don't need. We don't really. I wouldn't want more people. I mean, to the extent that we do have people involved in government, I would love to have more people like me. I wish there was more people who are leaders in their field or whatever, who have done things in their life, who would go into this process. It's a brutal process in some ways, but it's a rewarding process in many ways. So I wish more people would do it, because we have a country to save, and it's important times, like I say. So I would encourage anybody, by the way. It's easy to get involved. Everybody should be a little bit involved. Like, if you're listening, just think about running for office, maybe a small office, or looking into what's going on locally, and look into, think about running, and look into what your local candidates are. Look them up. Look up when the primary is. Look up some of these lesser known elections, like primaries and school board elections. A lot of these things are done on Tuesdays in the middle of some month somewhere, and sometimes 150, 170 people show up, change the whole thing. It ends up costing you millions of dollars on your taxes for your town. So these things matter. Or if you want to get involved with my campaign, go volunteer, donate. Put some money towards it, like you mean it, and call some people, canvas. You get a feel for what politics is. You can, anybody in the country, they could call us up, get a call list, call 100 voters in New Hampshire and say, hey, I'm telling you about Bruce Fenton. Here's why. These are the things you can do, and you can do them at a local level. Run for your local school board. Go in there and just raise some trouble. Go give a speech. A lot of towns allow you to have public speaking. Write a letter to your elected officials. These things do matter. I know it's easy to be cynical, and I'm as cynical as anybody. I don't even believe in government. I think the whole thing is stupid, and I hate politics. But if we don't do it, somebody else does it. I
Right.
could be able to vote to cancel out Elizabeth Warren, and that is something. That does count for something.
Yeah, exactly. I want to make note that actually came from one of our Twitch guests, that question did.
Great.
Something else that his name in particular is Direct from Philly. To give him credit, so thank you, Direct from Philly, for asking that question. The question I had was something that John and I talk about in the podcast on a regular basis, which was kind of the adoption not just of CBDCs, but of Bitcoin itself into the national currency of certain countries, and in particular, I'm thinking of Venezuela. But I noticed that India has been talking about this. I can't think of the other countries at the moment. I know China's rejected it, but it's kind of I don't believe that as a senator you will be directly addressing explicitly, although you may have to vote on things in the future. But how do you feel about the idea of adopting them? Would you, as a senator, push like Loomis and can't think of her name, the other
Gillibrand?
Bitcoin, yeah, Gillibrand, be pushing for adoption of Bitcoin as a national currency or the national currency?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that bill. There was too many things in it that kind of increased, overall. So, no, I wouldn't be in favor of any of that stuff. I like Bitcoin, but I just want these tyrants out of our business. And I don't mean Cynthia Lummis. She's one of the great people that I would look forward to working with. But I'm talking about, just overall government in general. The people who end up enforcing these things, and the mountain of bureaucracy that is funded by theft from our wages and worker wages and our wealth. It is a terrible and tyrannical thing that causes a lot of death and destruction. I mean, it's actual evil. This isn't just like, oh, hey, these people, I disagree with them. It's actual evil. It's a whole big. I view it as one big giant system called government. I don't differentiate the tiny little 1% of good things that might come out of government to the 99% of bad things, or the 10% of utterly horrible, inhumane, terrible things, death and destruction. I mean, this is what we always must remember when we wield this tool of government. Whenever we are waving around the biggest gun in the world. So when anybody ever has an idea, no matter how good, like, hey, let's make Bitcoin legal tender, you're waving around the biggest gun in the world. You're waving around a gun that has killed millions and millions and millions of people. Killed 2 million Iraqis in our lifetimes. People, some of them burned to death by phosphorus that was paid for by our wages. Our wages. We worked to make money so that arms companies could buy phosphorus to burn Iraqis alive. Our work and our wages, when you're working day to day, many, many, many months of your year, goes to taxes. And that tax goes to take people from their screaming children and put them in a cage, and they don't see their father or their mother for a decade because the mommy or daddy had a forbidden plan. This is absurd, and it's sick, and it's great, great evil that has no place in our world. And that's what we have to recognize whenever we say, "Oh, those evil words of there ought to be a law," And I don't care how good it sounds, a crypto law, whatever. No, we don't need any of it. We don't need any of it because it is fueled by a system that is partly evil. And the system itself is evil, stealing money from workers' wages through inflation and printing money, or through direct theft called taxes, and then taking that and putting in this big centralized system where people without accountability can make decisions is evil, because it's theft, and because the lack of accountability means that somebody can get a little bit of graft here or there, and then bang, you have 2 million people in Iraq die. And that's an unconscionable thing. There are people now, there are CFOs who wake up today really, really, really hoping that the drug war doesn't end, because they're making $70,000 a prisoner per year for for-profit prisons, and there's publicly traded for-profit prisons. So the root of this is bad money and broken money and too much laws. So the answer to every single question about every single one of these things for me is the same: no. Absolutely not. I'll stand there and say no, and I'll vote no. I don't care how good it sounds. I like NASA. NASA's cool. I got soft spots for stuff. I'm a human being. I think NASA's neat. But I don't think that. So what? Don't steal my neighbor's money because I think rockets are cool to look at.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
stupid, and that's actually evil, because my neighbor might need their money right now,
Right.
and my neighbor might need to buy diapers. So screw my rockets and whatever I think is cool. And we need to look. Everybody needs. And NASA is one of the only things that I think is kind of cool from government. But even though I think it's cool, it's not my right to steal money from you to pay for it. And all the other things I don't think are cool. I mean, I don't think most of what we are doing is. I don't think the DEA and the ATF are cool. I think the FBI does some pretty uncool things. The NSA and the CIA do some pretty uncool things. So, this is a big, horrible, evil mess, and I don't want to expand it in any way at all, no matter what. I'll vote no on everything, and I certainly don't want to give them new powers with CBDCs or anything like that.
Along these lines, it sounds like transparency would be a clean, cool ideal for what you're getting at. I know that I felt this for a long time. I've been paying taxes for almost 30 years through the jobs that I've had, and I think it's perfectly fine to have taxes. But I think one of the things that they made clear by the founding fathers when they started this country was not taxation without representation, but with. Now, I know some people are against that, and I'm personally against income tax. I wish we did it a different way, but that's not about this exactly. I just want to know about your thoughts about transparency of what Bitcoin. I know that you said this explicitly on your blog I've read, where it said that you could be anonymous because nobody knows that your name is attached to that long hexadecimal string of characters that defines a Bitcoin address. But Bitcoin does define where the money goes, and it's pretty clear what happens with it, where it goes, and how it is going. You may not know who it is that's making those transactions, but you do see where it's going. And if we particularly knew what, let's say, the government transacted pretty much everything it did on Bitcoin, we would see exactly where that money went. Not necessarily who owned it, but how do you feel? How would rephrase my question? How do you feel that this would be practical from a standpoint of cryptocurrency can do for transactions? Do you feel that the U.S. government should be completely transparent with everything it does, or no?
Yeah, they should be more transparent, but I don't know if that'd do much good, because there's a whole bunch of horrible things that they do and nobody seems to care. So it's not like you're going to be like, And now with the blockchain, we have the smoking gun. Look what they did. They spent $900,000 on a toilet. I mean, we already know that. I
Right.
mean, it's not like you're going to be like, aha. And then we uncovered they told you they were helping the children and they actually were just doing government bureaucrats. I mean, it's like we already know these people are evil and horrible and they're stealing our money and using it for terrible stuff. It's not like we need more accountability. It's like, hey, wait a minute. You told me you were going to liberate the Iraqi people. How come it took you 20 years?
Right.
I mean, nobody is sitting here asking it's not like a better ledger is going to make people say, wait a minute. Bin Laden's been dead for 15 years. How come we spent another $1 trillion in Afghanistan?
Right.
Like, what the heck were we there for? The guy wasn't even in that country. We went into that country because we thought bin Laden was there, which was stupid, by the way. You don't invade an entire country looking for one guy. You do. I mean, you do a manhunt and you find the guy. So it's just absurd on top of absurd. And then it's like, oh, now that he's dead, let's stay there another 10 years. It's crazy. It's crazy. So people need to be outraged, and they're not going to care. And there's nothing that a blockchain's going to do that's going to say like, oh my gosh, enough money to buy 1 million schools just went over and got blown up in bombs in Afghanistan. Nobody cares. And they will care right now when they go to their gas pump and they start to see $6 gas and they start to see, $9 bread. And you go to restaurants now, everything's weird and broken. How many people go to a restaurant and something's weird? I went to one, they didn't have beef. I went to a regular mainstream thing and they're like, no, sorry, no burgers. We got no beef. This is a problem. And so that's when people are going to start noticing, and then they're going to cut these things down. So it's the idea of transparency is good, but a better ledger isn't going to be the solution. What's the solution is for people to look at the absolute abject waste that's already happening, and have a philosophical idea to recognize that this is theft. This is a theft of their wages. The idea that you need somebody else to take your money and spend it to help you is absurd, because they're not going to help you. There's just going to be cuts on top of cuts on top of cuts. They don't need to do that. If it's a good idea, it doesn't need to be involuntary. If it's a great idea, they don't need to steal it from you. They don't need to put a gun in your face and say, hey, we're going to repossess your property if you don't pay it. If it's a good idea, we'll voluntarily do it, and we're very generous people. Charity is very effective. And so I'm entirely against it. And we got to recognize, though, even in the rare cases where you say, hey, this is a good use of government or a good use of taxes, always recognize that you're waving around the biggest gun in the world. Very dangerous thing.
Yes, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, and I appreciate that you have given it some thought, and would say that it's not really so much about transparency, it's about purpose and motive. And I think that would probably be accurate, because the justice system, I would hope, would agree with you. I have one more question, I think, from, yet again, the same Twitch participant here. He's talking about the New Hampshire Liberty and Alliance and the Free State Project. He says, have you been getting the support you deserve from this organization?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm real friendly with, certainly the Free State folks. I know all of them well, and Liberty Alliance, I'm definitely aligned. I haven't really formally talked to. I don't know if they have a formal questionnaire I need or something, but the Liberty folks all know me. I hope I don't take it for granted, but I assume that they're all going to be informed voters, and I'm as Liberty as a cat. Most Free Staters that I meet up here, within half a second, if they don't know me already, they figure it out. I mean, I introduced myself as a Ron Paul Republican. I introduced myself as a Free Stater. I got to live free or die. Gadsden flag snake thing on my on my campaign van.
Yep.
Yeah. So but I do need to. Here's the thing, though. I need to bring out the vote, especially for the primary, which is September 13th. Yeah. So the Liberty folks, because we probably have 40,000 Liberty people in New Hampshire, and if they show up, a lot of them don't show up to the primary because some of them are registered. Most of them are registered independents. A lot of them vote Libertarian only, or they don't vote at all, or they only vote in the general. But if we can get them to show up, they're allowed to vote in the Republican primary, as long as they're not a registered Democrat, and most of them aren't. So they can vote in the Republican primary for me on September 13th. Those 40,000 votes would be enough to win the thing. I mean, that's a big deal. If I can turn out the Liberty vote, then I'll win the primary. And if I do that, I'll be the next U.S. Senator.
How many votes would you need for that, the primary?
Probably 65,000 or something, based on the last the last time that it came through. So it's a very, very winnable thing. It's a small state, and it's a very winnable primary and a very winnable general election.
So, other than the primary vote, what's your biggest hurdle going through to be senator, and how are you overcoming these hurdles?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is the political machine, I'd say, is the biggest thing I've got to overcome. I came into this very resistant. I don't like political games. I don't like the game at all. I don't like the system. I don't like politics. I don't like listening to consultants or I feel like a lot of it is just silly gameplay. However, elections are a thing, and there are people who know how to win them, and there's things that work and things that don't work, and you can't just sit in your house and go on Twitter and talk about the world and win. You've got to get the word out. So there is a lot of sort of conventional campaigny political kind of things that you just sort of got to do. You got to go around and meet a lot of groups, and you've got to talk to certain people, and there is a sort of corniness to some of this stuff, and there's a self-centeredness which I'm not comfortable with as a private person. I don't like talking about myself. I grew out of that when I was in my 30s. I hadn't taken a selfie of myself in probably 5 years until 3 months ago, and I've probably taken 100. That's all I do now. Everything is about me, me, me. I can't even walk through my office. There's videos of me playing. My staff is editing stuff. It's a bit much. I don't like to make it all about me, and I also don't like zero sum games. I smacked down my opponent in the debate yesterday because I had to. I had to because I'm in a zero sum game. I got to beat him, and he's wrong on his issues, and I got to call that out. But that's not what I do in my regular life. I'm not a tear down guy. I'm a building together guy. I try and find common ground with people. So there's a lot of the sort of classic aspects of politics, and then one of them is money. Money's just a reality. These elections are bought,
Yep.
and the people that buy them have a system, and the people who don't have a voice. And there's a whole bunch of people, like, look how passionate the crypto community was about the infrastructure bill when they were trying to slide that crypto provision in there.
Yep.
But they're not active.
No.
It's like there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I love it, great, good for you, but they don't take that extra step and help and support it and stuff like that. And that's too bad, because it's like, I wish there wasn't money involved. I don't want to ask anybody for money. I wish politics in general was different, but it is what it is. And the old school Republicans and the Democrats and the establishment, they've got this down, and they'll just basically buy votes with PACs and stuff like that. They'll go and advertise widely, and just on pure name recognition, they'll get votes, and they'll turn out the people. So there's a lot of things like that are important. And I've got I just did my first fundraising video today. I hadn't done any, believe it or not, which is just crazy, because you need to fundraise, and you need to get supporters. You need you need that kind of thing. You need that infrastructure in a campaign. You can't do it all yourself. It helps. So that's part of it, and it's a process, and it's a very competitive sport. So people who support me, I'd say, support me. Take an hour if you can afford an hour of time. Volunteer, do something. And the best way to do it is decentralized. Don't call us up and say, hey, how can I volunteer? Go actually just do it. Just take 2 hours on a Saturday and say, I'm going to spend 2 hours just working on Bruce's stuff. I'm going to just share it to everybody. I'm going to, post it on things in New Hampshire, talk to anybody I know in New Hampshire, share, figure out a way, get the word out, or donate is the best thing if you can do, donate, get involved. These kind of things are very, very helpful. But, that's how you overcome the process. We got to stick together. It's not about me either. It's about these ideas. People who care about these ideas, whether you're a single issue crypto voter, or you're just somebody who cares about liberty and freedom in general, or maybe you care about something entirely different. But you should be involved. You should be involved and support somebody. Do a little bit to help somebody, and it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference because there's a lot of really well organized groups that are just made up of a bunch of people who donated $15 and they share a newsletter. I mean, if you have 1,000 people who donate $15 a month and they share a newsletter, that is a national wrecking force. Like if they're actually dedicated, all 1,000 of them, that is a national. Like you could get an audience with the president, all the presidential candidates. I mean, you could change the world with 1,000 people.
Yeah.
But they got to be dedicated. They got to be dedicated. And $15 a month is not that much, but it's that would be pretty significant.
Yep.
So there's a lot you can do, and you can do something with just a few people. So it's been encouraging to be involved myself as a candidate, and I want to encourage other people to do it. U.S. Senate's a little crazy. It's the craziest thing I've ever done. I don't know if I'd recommend U.S. Senate unless you got millions of dollars or a well-known name, but run for something. You can run for Congress, mayor, governor, state rep, these kind of things.
So. We really appreciate all the information you've given. It's actually a lot more than I ever thought I would get out of you. Saying, John said that he contacted you about 6 months ago and was interested in doing this interview, and so we're really grateful that we could get this interview with you. It's been a huge boon. We're much grateful for it, have you on our channel and get a chance to learn about your platform and your ideals about Bitcoin. It's really great to hear. It's all great to know. Someone of your prominence and candidacy and experience with Bitcoin in particular to be on the show. I mean, I've only been involved personally with all of cryptocurrency since mid 2014, and I think you've been doing it a little bit longer than that. I know John's been doing it a little bit longer. I don't know how long it's been for Mike explicitly, but we're all been doing this for a while. Okay,
Bitcoin was the first one I got into.
So in any case, we want to kind of wrap the show up, and we appreciate. I've been flashing your Twitter channel as well as your website up onto the screen the entire time, and I'd just like to know if these are the best places for people to contact you and get in contact to help you with your campaign. If that is true, then give us your outro.
Yeah, for sure. So Twitter, Bruce Fenton. Definitely check out the Twitter because I have some funny videos and some clips from the debate and stuff like that. So check out the Twitter and look at my last couple of days stuff. And then my website, brucefenton.com. We can accept donations and volunteers. If you're in New Hampshire, you want to vote or hang out a sign or something, contact us and, follow my stuff, share it. And I appreciate it. These are important times, and I hope that everybody is thinking about liberty and freedom and making our country as great as it can be.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for being on the show, Bruce. We hope to have you back at some future time, maybe once you become the senator for New Hampshire.
You got it.
So.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you very much. And we're going to end the show here in a second.